Today on Bridges, we're celebrating Christmas and talking about how to do that when we're in a great season of loss. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter, and I'm glad that you could join us today. Today we're going to be talking about Christmas and really how to celebrate, how to navigate through the holidays when you are in a great season of loss. And joining me as my guests are Kenny and April Gammon, and they're going to share their story of loss with us and just help us navigate through this holiday time. And April, it's good to have you back on Bridges.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And Kenny, I don't think I've ever had you on Bridges before.
I don't think so.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you today. And so, you know, April, I know that I've had you on before and you talked about your book and sharing just the devastating loss of your son and just adjusting to life in a very different way. And all of that, of course, I would imagine is heightened with the Christmas holiday, with the holidays. Is that true?
It is. And I think it's going into the holidays, and depending on when your loss was, you're still kind of numb from that. And so heading into the holidays, it's just a reminder of what is not there and what is missing. So it is difficult. It is very difficult.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say to both of you that I'm very, very sorry for the loss of your son. And I know that sometimes, especially what I understand from guests that I've had in the past, is that one of the things that is even harder is that a lot of people just want to get on with life and they just want you to be the Kenny and April Gammon that they knew a long time ago. And sometimes that just isn't possible. Is that right?
It's not, because you have to figure out how to deal with that loss the best you can. So some people do want it to be, and I've experienced that. They want it to be just like it's always been, and they love you, and they just want it to be a part. But I think you have to give yourself a little grace and figure out what works for you. And sometimes it may not be the norm. And I think that has to be okay with you, but also with your family.
Yeah, that we can all kind of embrace and go through this together. Kenny, for somebody that might be in this is their first Christmas after the loss of a son or a daughter or someone really close to them, what might you be able to share with them that might be helpful?
I've had a couple of friends who's been through this situation. They've asked me that. So I've always told them, just lean into it. Lean into your grief. Don't run from it. Because if you run from it, it's always going to be there. But if you learn how to walk through it each day and do it on your own time, not on somebody else's time. That's how I've learned how to do this.
Yeah. Is it hard to lean into it? Is the tendency to not want to face it?
Yes, it is, because the more you put in and push down, you never deal with it. So it's never done. But if you lean into it and just find your just find the new normal, what it is. Yeah.
And I think too, it's what me and Kenny experienced, the days that was really, really difficult for me, he seemed to be a little bit on the higher part. So he would pull me up. And then opposite, the days he was really down, I seemed to be up here. And we just kind of walked through it together and helped each other through that.
Because, April, that's one of the things that I've heard over the many years of doing Bridges and talking to people and parents that have lost children and just all of that, is that couples rarely grieve exactly the same way. And sometimes there can be frustration in a couple because, if you're feeling a little up that day and he's down, or vice versa, many times one party can think, well, you're just really not missing this person. You're just really not doing this. Does that happen?
It does. And I remember a friend of Kenny's had lost his son right before our son passed. And he gave him great advice. And he said, let her grieve however she needs to grieve. Right. Do not try to fix her. And that was so huge for my grief because he was there. And most men want to fix things.
Of course.
Yes,
so,
very true.
It was comforting for him to go, whatever you need, I'm here. If you need me to listen, I'll listen. If you need me to say something, whatever you need.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that was very, very helpful.
Was that hard for you to do?
It was, but it wasn't
Mhm.
because that's how she was for me. If I was having a really bad day, she would just let me be and just let me grieve the way I needed to grieve.
Mhm.
So yeah, but to try to fix her, yeah, I tried it first, but then I realized that hey,
Right.
she needs to do it on her own.
Right. You know, I guess it's that our way of fixing people is so contrary really to the way that God brings us through healing and through that journey. We see somebody falling apart and crying and we just want all of that to stop.
Right, right.
Right? And I would think any man that loves his wife just doesn't want her to cry. He just
Right.
doesn't, you don't want to see someone go through that. And yet those tears and all of that emotion can be the very thing that helps us process the loss.
Right.
Did you all have to come up with new traditions for the holidays, or?
We did. And one of the things that we did, of course, Christmas is when family gets together, they're making memories. So your loss is intensified because you see what is missing so
Right, yeah,
much.
that was hard.
So as we were getting everything out to decorate, which was really difficult that year, we were putting our stockings up, and of course we had one for Dustin, and it was, again, hard because he wasn't there. So we had to decide, what are we going to do to keep him in our traditions and a part of what we do to remember him, but so that it wouldn't be so painful.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we did was we decided, because our stockings is our fun part of Christmas, and it always has been. I always put a little special something in the stockings, and the boys were always excited on Christmas morning.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we decided to do is not to buy gifts for the stockings anymore, but we would write letters to each other. So it was a letter of the things that we remembered throughout the year, something to encourage them, something we were looking forward to the next year. So we each wrote everyone a letter, and we included Dustin in that. So we would write him a letter, and on Christmas morning in our stockings, everyone had letters, and even Dustin had a letter.
Mm-hmm.
So none of us have read those letters. We've kept them in a box, and we continue that every year. And maybe someday we will read them, and then again, maybe someday we won't, but it's there. So it's our way of remembering him throughout the year, but being able to keep him a part of one of our traditions.
Yeah.
Which would be so important. You know, you never, I mean, you're obviously never going to forget your child. I mean, there's just no way for that to happen. There's no way to just get over that and move on with life. But for people to be able to find some way to grieve in a healthy way and honor so many memories and so much fun and so much love throughout the years. How old was Dustin when he passed,
He was
Kenny?
18.
18 years
Mhm.
old.
Yes.
So
And
he's a-
Christmas was his favorite.
Oh.
Yes, it
He
was.
loved the holidays.
Loved Christmas.
He loved family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you help, or were you able to help, like extended family members or people that you celebrated with? Because it is, of course, your immediate family that probably feels the most intense. But the ripple effect for everybody else that loves Dustin.
We tried. I think when people love you, they don't want to see you hurt.
Right.
So even your family and your friends don't know what to say
Right.
or what to do.
Mhm.
So sometimes they wouldn't even mention his name.
Mm.
And so we would always try to say, oh, well, you know, Dustin this, and I remember when he this, or if he was here, this is what, you know, we would be doing. So hopefully that helped our family to understand, oh, they do want to talk about him. And so as the years have passed, we see that they do. So it's not something that they tiptoe around.
Yeah.
It's something that they embrace.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so they do remember him. And that's the biggest thing for us, is just to remember him.
Yes, and I think for them to be able to remember him.
Right.
You know, I know that, and you know, because I'm certainly not an expert on anything, just from talking to people for all these years, the one thing that I found is that people want their loved one to be remembered.
Right.
Even though there's grief and sadness, they want to be able to talk about it and to talk about the person. So is it helpful, Kenny? Like, one of the things I try to do is say, are you at a place where we can talk about so-and-so? And then I just go by whatever the person says. Is that good to do?
Yeah, because I always loved to talk about him. Still today, if somebody would mention something familiar what he did, I love to sit and talk about Destin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, what did he like about Christmas the most?
He it's like any other kid. He loved gifts. He also loved giving too. He was excited. Like if he bought us something for Christmas, he loved to see the excitement on our face as we opened our gift up to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Was he one of those that would sneak and peek at the gifts?
Oh yes.
or open and rewrap. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Oh, I've done that too.
Oh yes. You can't shake that box.
Isn't that the thing? The kid looks at the parents. Can I shake this box? But see, like, even when I look at you all now, just the love and the happy, just the joy of honoring and remembering Destin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It takes some time to get there. But I think once you get to a place where you can just remember those happy times. And I remember his last Christmas, he wasn't allowed to be around people because of his immune system. So we stayed at home, and he loved to cook. And he's like, I'm going to make us all Christmas, dinner.
Oh, yes, he was
And
excited.
he planned and he prepared for it. And I went to the store and bought all this stuff. So he was so excited. So it's those things, you can look back and remember.
Yeah. And you're saying, like, you love to do that for somebody to be sensitive and cognizant of the fact to wait till they're ready. Just kind of ask and see how that'll go.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, we've got to take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk more about processing your grief and going through that very first Christmas season without your loved one.
If you're looking for ways to grow your faith, we invite you to go to monicaschmelzer.com, where you can watch Bridges interviews and Monica's teachings on demand. You'll also find free online extras that offer practical ways to live out your faith. Visit monicaschmelzer.com, where you'll find hope, because truth changes everything.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on Bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
Join the Bridges community on Facebook. Visit Facebook and search for Bridges with Monica. We would love to connect with you.
If you're just joining us today on Bridges, we're talking about Christmas and Christmas celebrations and really trying to offer some hope and grace to people who might be processing a loss or recent loss of a loved one. And maybe you just have a family member that recently lost someone that they dearly love, and you're not sure what to say or how to say it. My hope and prayer is that today's program will be helpful for you, helpful for all of us as we want to love God and love one another well and just go through all of what this life has to offer. And this side of heaven, loss is one of those things that we're all going to have to go through at some point. And Kenny and April, I just appreciate so much that you're willing to come and share. Losing a son at 18 is just a tragic loss, something that no parent ever expects. And I am so sorry for your losses. I'm so sure that those watching are as well. But just to appreciate how willing you are to want to help and to want to share and help others. April, what is one thing that you would say, if there is one thing, that was most helpful to you to help you process that grief and yet still show up for the holidays?
I think it's one of those things that you have to learn, however you grieve, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that will tell you what to do or how to do it, but everybody's different. So I think it's figuring out what works for you and the way that you can just get through it and walk through it. And it's always helpful if your family or your friends just give you grace with that, because everybody's different. And I know that when you're hurting, sometimes you don't know what you need. And so when someone asks you, what do you need? You don't know the answer to that because you don't really know. And I think it's just being there, whether you're sitting beside someone and not even saying a word.
Right.
But just giving yourself grace, and then, you know, hopefully others will give you the grace to be able to grieve whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
I think sometimes the most powerful and loving thing we can do is just show up.
Right.
Yes.
You know, to think that there would be anything I could say to either of you or to anyone that is going to make them feel better about the tragic loss of their child, what would that be? You know, I remember, Kenny, when I think I was about 13, I have a first cousin that was tragically killed in a hockey game, just a kid's hockey game. And it was just a fluke accident where the hockey puck just hit him at the base of his neck, and it broke his neck. And within 24 hours, he had passed. And I remember, Kenny, my aunt, you know, she just did not want to put up that Christmas tree. She had formerly been a person that just baked and baked, you know, and tried to fatten us all up and make us happy. And like, that just wasn't there for her. And I just remember as a teenager, just so much wanting to say something, but like all the family's like, shh, 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 don't say anything. Like we got to tiptoe all around this. What would you say about that?
I think you have to, like in our situation when Dustin passed, it did cross our minds. Do we want to do Christmas like this again? But we had another son.
Yeah.
Who was 15, right? And so you have to take us each step each day. So we had to do Christmas. You might not have been the same because our normal was different now.
Right.
So we started doing things a little different at Christmas. Christmas didn't mean what they used to mean. They were, you know, it is about the gifts. Nothing's wrong with gifts, giving gifts and stuff like that.
No, of course not.
But we found out that Christmas means so much more now. And so that's what we did. We celebrated Christmas. We put the Christmas tree up. We put the decorations up. And then our gifts, even our gifts changed. We ended up doing 3 gifts. We did a spiritual gift, a need, and a want. And that's what we did. And so we still do that today. So it's good that you just keep walking it out each day.
Yeah, because what we're not saying here is that there's one pat answer of this is how you do Christmas after a loss. And it might even be like a testing of waters, like, do we like this? Do we not like this? And you mentioned you still had a son.
Right.
And that was the case with in my cousin, with my aunt and everything that I mentioned. The son that was tragically killed was the younger son. So there was still the older son. So I think the first Christmas, they just weren't able to do anything. But they didn't want to, my aunt and uncle didn't want to lose the son that they still had in their grief. Like, they didn't want him to feel like, gosh, his life didn't matter.
Right.
How did you and April address that? Or did you?
Yeah, we just like us, we grieved our different ways. So we let Dylan grieve the way he needed to grieve. But we loved him through that. We let him know that, hey, we're here. If you just want to talk, if you just want to sit here and cry, we'll cry with you. But we let him experience the different things. And then we tried to make Christmas special for him also.
Well, we asked him. I mean, and he was 16 at that Christmas, but we asked him, what is it that you want? You know, how do you want to celebrate? How do you want to remember your brother? You know, is there something that we can do? And I think that's when he wanted to start buying his own gifts and giving, because giving became different for us, you know, and so many people. And again, like Kenny said, it's not that is not okay to give, because it is. So we don't knock that, but it just became so different in what is important for us. It's not about all these things that we can buy. It's about the things that will be lasting,
right?
And the memories that we can have with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think someone gave us the greatest advice. Even though you're grieving, don't lose your son in the midst of your own grief. And so we tried really hard to just grab a hold of him and, you know, just walk with him. And he was young, you know,
Yeah.
and he didn't know how to maneuver that.
No.
Right.
And
so
he was the younger brother,
Yes,
right? So I
yes.
would think, like, when you've always had a sibling, you've always had a big brother,
Yes.
you know, if it's hard as an adult to grieve, what is that like as a teenager?
And they were extremely close.
Yeah, very
extremely
close.
close. So it was hard. He said he does not like being an only child. He's like, I've had both, and I prefer to have a sibling.
I can understand
Yeah.
that. I can understand that. How is he doing now?
He's doing
Doing
great.
great,
He's
doing
married
great.
and has his own, you know, little girl, and starting his own traditions. And
Mhm.
so just to watch that, I mean, that brings us joy.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
so our
Christmas-
Christmas have
yeah,
changed.
yeah. Christmas is exciting now because you get to see it through a kid's eyes again.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Because
it's
you've
brought the
got yourself a
excitement back.
grandbaby.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. She is the joy of our life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things that I'm hearing both of you say, and you know, this could really apply to all of us, you know, to allow ourselves, Christmas doesn't have to be the same every year.
No, it doesn't.
No. And everybody, I think, gets hung up a little bit on traditions. And I'm all about that too.
Sure.
But I think you have to find different traditions when life changes.
Mhm.
And it may not even be in loss. I mean, it could be divorce. I mean, it could be any kind of change.
Mhm.
You just have to figure out,
Right.
what do I do now? And what does this look like? And then, you know, embrace it and move forward.
Well, and even a geographic change, you know, moving across the country, not having as many family members around or any of that. And people have relational losses. It's not necessarily a passing away, but, you know,
Right.
not that any family members would ever get mad and
Right.
stop speaking. That would
Right.
never happen anywhere.
Right, right. Well, even for us, I mean, Dylan is married and has a little girl, but they live in a different state. So our Christmases changed once again. So again, it's just finding, okay, here we are. It's a new normal. And how are we going to change this and embrace it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's so important for all of us because the one thing about life is that it is always going to change.
It's always changing.
Right?
Yes.
Seasons of life, where we live, all of these things change and matter. Kenny, what would you say? And I'm going to ask you this just because typically, not always, but typically it's really hard for men to express emotions. Yeah, I'm going to say that. You know, you guys tend to hold it in more. For
Right.
a dad, for a man, for a husband that's watching it, and he's just afraid because, like, he's watching his wife fall apart.
Right.
And I would think that if I was a man, just trying to put myself in those shoes, if I saw someone just falling apart, like, I would just try to be strong because I would just think, my goodness, if I just let go with this grief, who knows where the bottom of this is going to be.
Right. Well, it is true. It is very hard to sit and to watch. I remember April waking up in the mornings and crying,
Oh.
and it would just kill me
Oh.
that she was doing that. But I finally had to let go of the fear I had of crying, and I felt so much better than when I finally let it out. And she was always there with me. I would call her on the phone and say, "Hey, I'm having a horrible day," and I would break down. It was okay to break down with her or find someone that you could talk to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I bring that up only because what I found in my life is sometimes the very thing that I fight is the very thing that I need in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like sometimes if I just will let my guard down just to cry in front of my husband and not to act like I'm mad about it, but just to show that I'm just really sorrowful,
Right.
that's the moment that I really feel that really close connection.
Right.
That's what I really need. I mean, I want to push that down, right? Because I've got a million things to do. That's how I am. Not saying that's how everybody is. And I find that with the Lord too. That
Right.
if I will just let my guard down to say, you know, God, I know none of this is your fault. It's not your doing. But God, I just hate that this happened in my life.
Mhm.
And I just cry. I can feel his comfort. But if I won't dare to do that, it all just stays under the surface. So then I've
Right.
got the smile.
Yeah. the
But
fake smile.
inside, The storm is raging.
Right.
Is that how it is for you?
It's vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's so hard for everybody.
Yeah.
But if we could just let it go, then that's where you find your comfort.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really hard to find that comfort if you have your own strength.
Right.
So if you let go of yourself and just let him comfort you, and
Yeah.
then he'll give you his strength.
Yeah.
God is always there. So, you know, we pray together and we went through that together. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so many couples are not able to do that. And my hope and prayer is that people watching today would see that, not that anybody does it perfectly, but that as horrible as all of it is, you did it together.
Right.
We did not want to be a statistic.
No, we did not.
No. And I think sometimes when tragedy happens, that's what we have to decide, right?
Right.
Yes.
Like, we are not going to be a statistic. We are not going to let what happens most of the time happen to us, because we're going to lean into the grief, we're going to lean into Christ, and we're going to trust God anyway.
Right. Definitely.
When we made a decision at the right after Dustin passed, that we were only going to let good come from his passing.
Mm.
So we was not going to live in his death. We were going to live in his life. We were going
Amen.
to celebrate that. And so we were going to make it, and we were going to overcome that.
Yeah.
And that's what we tried to do.
That is amazing and wonderful. We are out of time, but I want to thank you, Kenny, for coming
You're
today,
welcome.
and thank you, April.
Thank you for having
Thank you for
us.
sharing and being vulnerable with us today.
Thanks for watching Bridges.
Don't give in. God's word says you're an overcomer. If you hadn't done blah, 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 this wouldn't have happened. And let me say this to you. If you think that you are in a mess of your own making, you are still an overcomer. When that temptation comes, you want to make sure that you are dressed for battle. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. It takes training. It takes discipline. And so when you're fighting that good fight of the faith, you take your story, whatever it is, and you saturate it in faith, and you fight for it.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your next event.
For more information on today's guest, visit the website on your screen. Prayer changes things. If you need prayer, call 615-754-0039 or email prayer@ctntv.org.
Don't miss another episode of Bridges. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today, where you can find all of Monica's latest teachings and interviews. It's easy to do. Just visit youtube.com, search Monica Schmelter, and click subscribe. Once you are subscribed, click the bell icon to get notified when a new episode is available to view. Thanks for watching Bridges.